Welcome to Thursday's midweek first day of practice preparing for Monday night's game against the Tennessee Titans. I am your host of Dolphins In Depth, Omar Kelly, Dolphins columnist for the Miami Herald. And joining me is the illustrious Barry Jackson, fresh off the practice field, where we saw a quarterback battle. Barry, dare I say that? Can we put it in quarterback battle? Is that the word you want to use? Is that how you want to describe it?
Well, McDaniel said he knows who's going to start. He has a pretty good idea.
He knows who he thinks is going to start.
He thinks, right, but he needs to see something. So you and I have surmised, based on tea leaves, that Tyler Huntley is the favorite to start, but he needs to see that he has a command of the offense. He needs to see some semblance of chemistry with receivers who he hasn't thrown much to before. So I can understand McDaniel being hesitant to share it because he basically needs to be impressed on Thursday and Friday to move forward with him. But when your other option is Tim Boyle, what choice do you have? And an injured
Skyler Thompson. The fact that everybody just keeps dumping on Tim Boyle, like he didn't look less than pedestrian, but he looked decent against the Seahawks compared to Skyler Thompson, a healthy Skyler Thompson, not the broken ribs version of Skyler Thompson, who we watched kind of practice today. And then also confusing us in this situation, Barry, is Tyreek Hill, who's telling us tall tales, or is Tyreek telling us the truth? Today, Tyreek.
I think it's typical tall tales.
You're going with tall tales?
Yes. Yes. And just to tell people, Tyreek said he was asked initially about Tyler Huntley today and said, I only caught passes from Tim Boyle, which would appear to be a fib. Right. I saw the wink there. But later he got serious. He was asked about Tyler Huntley, thought he made a couple of interesting comments because you do get insight from Tyreek when he's not kidding around. He said, this dude can make every throw. This dude is special with his legs. He's a special talent. But then he said something which is a good point. He said, there are a lot of things that go into this offense, motion and everything else that he's got to learn in the study room. He said he's done a good job in the study room this week. Huntley came in on Tuesday on an off day, as you would expect he would, and as he should, to work on the offense. So if he's able to master it, we would think he would be starting on Monday, but he's got to master it. Is this the obvious move to you, Omar, or are you more on the side of he needs a second week to learn and roll with Tim Boyle, a sentence that I would never say or think that I'd have to say in a million years?
Can we stop dumping on Tim Boyle?
I've got to tell you something about Tim Boyle. I'm going to let people in on a little secret. We had a discussion in the media room today about whether Tim Boyle has the worst touchdown to interception ratio, including college career and the NFL, of any quarterback in history. We could find no evidence that there was anyone worse. But at UConn, he had 1 touchdown and 13 interceptions. How do you? Unbelievable. Then in the NFL, 4 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. And yes, he was competent. He was barely adequate on Sunday. But at the same time, you have to go with Huntley and see if he gives you a spark. He brings the rushing element. And assuming he can competently run the offense, to me, it's a no-brainer. Not just Huntley this week, but assuming that he's decent on Monday, Huntley going forward for the rest of the Tua absence. Would you go back to Skyler when he's healthy, or do you want to make that decision after he's
I'm sorry. You know what? I want to give Skyler the benefit of the doubt and say you are not as bad. I've watched Skyler for 3 years. I've never seen him play that bad. Have you ever seen him play or practice that bad?
No, he seemed nervous. He seemed skittish.
I want to give him the benefit of the doubt that was not him, or maybe his ribs got broken on play 1 and he started playing weird from that point. I like Skyler personally. I know for a fact he won that battle with Mike White, who has proven he's an established backup quarterback in the NFL. Now, what I cannot explain or cannot justify or cannot reason with anybody about is why Tyler was so off schedule on everything that he was doing against the Seahawks, and why it contributed to the offense being out of sync. We can blame him on so many different things, like the sack that he took on the second Hail Mary pass. But the reality is a lot of things went wrong during Skyler Thompson's start, and it culminated and added pressure to Skyler, and it wasn't pressure that he was ready to handle. So, like for instance, the final play of the Hail Mary that should have been a Hail Mary, he only had one option on that route, and Jalen Waddle voluntarily ran himself out of bounds, which makes him ineligible for the play. Why he would do that, I have absolutely no idea. And so Skyler had nobody to throw to, and unfortunately, he had no feel for the pressure, so he took a sack. But let's get to today. Watch Skyler struggle to put on his pads. Watch Tyler attempt to throw passes in the availability that we were allowed to see. Only saw him throw 10 yards. Saw some winces in those 10-yard throws. When they were working play action and handoff, every other quarterback threw the pass after the play action. Skyler did not. There would have to be a miracle, like Jesus coming down and touching his rib cage and healing it, for me to think that he could possibly play. This is, when you talk to the team, this is just the situation that they're in. They're on their third quarterback. It is where they are. This is the reality of exactly where they are, and they have to make the best of it. Looks like Tyler Huntley is going to be that guy unless he just absolutely just fails to learn 30 passing plays. And I kind of got tipped off on this, which was the weirdest thing, one of the weirdest moments ever for me in a Dolphins locker room after the game. And I think I told you this, where we finished talking to Tim Boyle about his performance and the opportunity that soon he's going to get because Skyler's got broken ribs. And the minute we're done, the literal 10 seconds had passed from the time we're done. He turns to Tyler Huntley and he says to Tyler, "Get ready. Like the job is yours." And I thought to myself, like, does this guy know something that we all don't know? He probably knows I am a backup quarterback, and I'm here to be a backup quarterback, and I don't want none of this business about starting. Tyler, come on down.
I love that story. And obviously, Skyler Thompson isn't too much discomfort to contribute, even if he had performed well on Sunday. So to me, Huntley's the obvious choice on Monday. But I got to tell you what has to change. This team has to stop committing penalties. Top 4 in the league in offensive penalties, leading the league in pre-snap penalties. I talked to Julian Hill today, who's been very hard on himself for committing 5 penalties so far. By the way, his run blocking has been really good. Best among tight ends in the league, along with Isaiah Likely, if you believe the Pro Football Focus metrics. So that's why he hasn't been yanked from the lineup despite the 5 penalties. And he said John Ember pointed out to him, and he knows he has to fix it.
And he is the starter now.
Yes. He's the starter. He surpassed Durham Smythe. So I want to see that cleaned up, and I want to see inside zone running. I want to see running between the tackles because that's when they've been most effective. And guess who is hobbled for Tennessee? Jeffrey Simmons, their best defensive lineman. He has an elbow injury. He missed practice today. Titans are 20th in run defense in the league. They were gouged by Green Bay. Green Bay crammed them up their throat for 188 yards on the ground in a game against them. So this is the Dolphins' run game opportunity, I think, to take off. They've been so stagnant early in the season, averaging just 3.7 yards per carry, which is 27th in the league. Last year, as many of you know, they were first in the league at 5.0 per carry. I wrote about that today on MiamiHerald.com, Omar, and I found a couple of interesting things about the run game. First of all, Liam Eichenberg's graded out the best, he and Teron Armstead, of all of their offensive linemen according to the PFF metrics. I know you're skeptical of PFF. What's been the problem with their blocking has been Tyreek Hill's blocking among the worst for wide receivers in the league on those perimeter runs, according to PFF. Durham Smythe's blocking has been average. That's why Julian Hill has surpassed him. Alec Ingold is the worst ranking blocking fullback and one of the worst running backs in general blocking, according to Pro Football Focus. So I think that's why some of the perimeter runs, I should mention Austin Jackson also is graded poorly in the run game. So I think that's why some of the perimeter runs have not been effective, but they have run decently between the tackles. So Brewer and Eichenberg, if you believe the metric sites, they've been effective in run blocking. I think they need to run more up the gut, see if it's successful, especially if Jeffrey Simmons isn't playing. What kind of game plan do you want to see? Because on one hand, you could say, well, they need to take the pressure off the quarterback and run. But on the other hand, you could also very fairly say they need to get the ball to Tyreek and Waddle more. So what's the right balance there?
In my opinion, based on what I've known from the Tennessee Titans, and yes, a lot of this is the Mike Grable Tennessee Titans, but they are built with a physical blueprint. They are one of those teams like the San Francisco 49ers, the Baltimore Ravens, the Philadelphia Eagles, where they're going to beat you up in the trenches. Yes, Jeffrey Simmons is injured right now, but who knows if he's going to play in the game because of this elbow injury. But then I bring up the point to you: they beat them up in the trenches last year without Jeffrey Simmons. So
correct.
Now it could be matchups, but there are just some teams that have a blueprint and a DNA of we are going to push you around, we're going to impose our will, and you're going to take it. And that just so happens to be the Titans, which is why they've edged Miami in a lot of these games. You go back to the Brian Flores Tua feud, FU, Tennessee game back up there in 2022. Was that 21?
Where it was earlier, yeah, I think it was 21. Yeah,
where the Dolphins just got pushed around at the line of scrimmage. It was a weather game. That was the last time. The Dolphins had that playoff. We're in the conversation for the playoffs. Tua has a blow up on Flores at the end of the game after Flores is trying to call him out for his performance. But in that game, pushed around as well. Last year, when they gave up this colossal lead that they had in the fourth quarter, they got pushed around the entire game. One of the interesting things, Barry, about that game and that performance was where I discovered Aaron Brewer.
Yes.
Because he would push around Christian Wilkins, like wherever. And I was like, whoa, what is this? Now it'll be interesting to see. We're doing a bad job of doing like going to former teams stories, Barry. We gotta get on our grind. We didn't even talk to Brewer today about facing his former team. Or David Long, who's got that hamstring injury, going back and getting that Titans revenge. I don't want to play into Tennessee's strengths. I just don't. I would rather air it out. And not that you can air it out because you don't really have a quarterback or an offense that you can execute with unlimited options. But we'll see what Mike McDaniel.
Well, you know what airing it out could mean? It could mean as simple as screen passes to Tyreek, simple throws for Tyler Huntley, if it is indeed Tyler Huntley on Monday night.
Let me remind you this. Darius Sneed is on the other side, and that guy bullied Tyreek Hill in the playoffs last year.
Right, exactly. And Tennessee's third in the league in pass defense. You also have to be aware of Harold Landry. He had 3 sacks in that game last year against them. So I'd like to see, I don't want to say a conservative game plan because that's not what I mean, but something cautious where you're not forcing Tyler Huntley into doing things that he's not capable of doing yet in his first real game action as a Dolphin. So I would say shorter throws, make more use of screens to Jonnu Smith. Last year, Jonnu Smith had 11 screens. I don't remember one yet. Maybe there was in game 2 against Buffalo that I forgot.
There's been a screen, but it's not to the level of my expectations. I think Jonnu is also battling an injury. He wears one compression sleeve. That's not a fashion statement, no matter what the WNBA wants to make you think that it is. And he's been doing that since back in OTA days. Now, that's not an excuse for the lack of productivity that I've seen from the tight end position, because I expected, as did you, Barry, the tight end to be the unit that made the biggest jump. And right now, all we've got is Julian Hill as a starter. And that's pretty much the only change. Durham Smythe had a rough patch of games. And to be honest with you, this is how this coaching staff operates. You struggle, somebody outperforms you, flip-flop on the depth chart, and you got to outperform them to get that opportunity back. So it'll be interesting to see how Tanner Conner has been playing a little bit more than Durham Smythe. So
Tanner Conner got 8 snaps. They did throw him a deep pass the other day. They didn't connect on that. He did catch his first pass. But are we ever going to see a legitimate number 3 receiver before Beckham is back? I've almost given up hope that they have someone. Malik Washington finally might get a chance this week. His quad is healing. But again, how much are you going to count on a rookie? So I think they're just stuck really without a legitimate number 3 receiver until Odell comes back. McDaniel said this week Odell has made progress. He hasn't had any setbacks. But what's been so weird about all of this, Omar, after his off-season procedure is McDaniel has continued to say he has no setbacks. Well, if he's had no setbacks, why did he begin the year on PUP? I know Chris Greer said that Beckham wanted to play. It was the Dolphins' decision. Players on PUP have to sit out 4 games, as many of our listeners know, and then they have a 21-day period during which they can be activated, or then they would be out for the year. So obviously Odell's going to be activated, barring a setback. The question is, can he come back quickly enough to return before the bye in Game 5 against Indy on October 6th? Most players tend to need more than 1 week of practice after not practicing at all in training camp. Can he count on him for the Colts game?
Let me remind you something, Barry. You know who has chemistry with Tyler Huntley?
Who? Odell Beckham, former Raven.
Looky there.
Okay, he's got to be active then against Indy.
Settled. You know, I'm not guaranteeing that because I looked at Odell today in the locker room, and this is what I do for a living. I do notice a limp, and I'm thinking, it could be a hard workout. I've already gotten myself in trouble with Jalen Phillips about a limp, so I'm not going overboard there. But we'll see where he is. There are a lot of guys, by the way, Barry, expected to come back or expected to be available after this game. You have Bradley Chubb, which I don't think that's going to be a possibility.
Right, probably later October, November. Isaiah Wynn. Are we going to see Isaiah Wynn? Remember, with Chris Greer, we asked him, will Isaiah Wynn even play this year? And he was non-committal. But you noticed something about Isaiah Wynn a couple of days ago, right?
Actually, Isaiah Wynn was on the field doing bike work today, and that's the first time I've ever seen him do some football activity. Man, could they use? They need a resurgence of bodies, of energies, reinforcements coming, and that's what the Odell Beckhams, the Isaiah Wynns, the Cameron Good. You forgot about Cameron Good. The River Craycraft, and I don't think Rivers. Yeah, I don't think River is going to be cleared to practice and play, but people have done their time in the first 4 weeks of the season, and now their eligibility is available. Obviously, it's probably going to be more likely that a lot of them return after the bye as opposed to before the bye. But right now this team is just hemorrhaging, and they need to stop the bleeding. And they need to put together something that will allow them to not embarrass themselves on Monday Night Football. So that's
and I want to throw this in too about injuries before we move on from that topic. A lot of people wondering about Raheem Mostert. As you've accurately said, he's their best outside zone runner. He would help tremendously boost those numbers of outside runs where they're averaging less than 4 per carry. Still precarious position for him with the chest injury. It's a very unusual injury. As he told you, he indicated late last week that he wasn't certain if he'd be ready for Tennessee. He did practice again today on a limited basis, but he also practiced last week on a limited basis. So I would say toss up whether he plays. If not, we'll obviously see a lot of A-Shane. A little surprised Jalen Wright got only 2 carries. I know they wanted to ride A-Shane last week, but do you think he warranted more than that? Or that Jeff Wilson warrants more? Or do you like the 80 to 90% reliance on A-Shane when Mostert's out?
I think that Jeff Wilson is their 3rd best back. However, you can't argue with the productivity that you're getting from Jeff Wilson. None of it looks good, Barry. I mean, I know everybody's like, oh, Achane is such a fantasy demon, and he's killing it and tearing it up. Achane's averaging 3.5 yards per carry right now. And yes, he's the team's leading receiver, one of the top targets, 10.2 yards per reception. But I think until you find that 3rd weapon in the passing game, everything is going to be stifled. And what you're seeing right now is a stifled offense. Obviously, it's not going to look the same without Tua Tagovailoa. Tua is the difference maker. I've always said he's the engine that makes the machine go. Everybody gives the credit to Mike McDaniel and play calling and, weaponry. Well, now you're taking a look at it. You say, what's going on here? And it don't look that good without Tua, does it?
No.
People argue that it didn't look good with Tua too. But,
exactly.
But I will say this. They converted on 3rd downs. They were somewhat efficient in the red zone in the first game and a half that Tua played. Obviously, the concussions and the 3 interceptions before the concussions, not ideal. but Tua was pressing. That's just a reality of the situation.
He was. And I want to make a point about Tua, Omar, but to just finish up the A-Shane discussion, he does hold some responsibility for the run game being diminished from a year ago. He's averaging 1.98 yards after contact, after the first defender gets a hand on him, compared to 4.9 last year. That is a huge drop-off. Last year, he was third in the league, yards after contact average per carry. This year, 78th of 96 backs. So even though he's been a productive player so far this season, he's really emerged in the passing game. He's kind of been their bell cow back. He's just not getting enough yards.
Their calling card is breaking that big run when they get to those outside zones, and the linebacker's been cut down by the guard, and then they can turn on the afterburners and get to that second level. Okay, they haven't had that run yet, Barry. So, that's where I think you'll see the run game look a little bit better when Raheem is back, and Raheem is an outside zone master, and people have to put the respect where respect is due. He is a Pro Bowler. He had the second most productive statistical season out of all the backs in the NFL last year. And that's despite sharing the backfield with Devon. That's despite not playing in the final 3 games of the season. Put some respect on that man's name. Now, with that
21 touchdowns, which can't be overlooked. Getting in the end zone 21 times is an accomplishment. Yeah, so I don't want to give that short shrift. They're going to be a better offense when they have Beckham and Mostert and Craycraft back. The question is, can they get all of those guys together and Tua back at once? But I made this point on Twitter today, responding to one of your tweets. I think what has the fan base depressed is not necessarily the 1 and 2 start. I think what has me distressed and worried, and this probably applies to some of the fans, I certainly can't speak for all of them, is the fact that we saw the Dolphins against the measuring stick team with Tua in the game on that Thursday night. And not only have they not surpassed Buffalo in year 3 of this era where they have to win, but they seem further away from Buffalo than they were when McDaniel came. For that, I'm just saying that they've seemingly regressed because of poor roster decisions made in the offseason. That's what has me worried.
Hold on, Barry. Isn't Buffalo out here smacking people? I mean,
yes, they are, but the Dolphins were supposed to be at that stage. By the way, how has it turned out that I'm now the prince of pessimism and you're Mr. Optimism? It used to be reversed. I mean,
wait. We're looking at a product without Tua. We're looking at a product without Raheem Mostert.
But I'm looking at the product with Tua before he went out.
Okay, he won the Jacksonville game. Let's not act like he didn't. That's a fourth quarter comeback.
Thursday night.
That's a fourth quarter comeback against Jacksonville. Then we pressed against the Bills. It was a big moment, a big game, signature game. This is when the tide is going to turn, and he pooped himself. Barry, sometimes your toddler takes a poopy in their underwear. It happens.
Why does it happen always against Buffalo? Why does it consistently happen against Buffalo?
That's what they're scared of Buffalo, Barry. Who tell me where evidence you have that says this team is not scared of Buffalo Bills? You have none.
Well, I don't know if they're scared or they're not, but I will say this. That Thursday game before Tua went out was the most convincing evidence that we have received that the roster construction is not good enough. And it kind of supported my theory to you that this is not a Super Bowl contender. It's a fringe playoff team, right? I mean, they were smacked before Tua left the game. And again, it's not all Tua's fault, even though he had the 3 picks. Not all of them were his fault. It was a team effort. But you could not emerge from the Tua healthy portion of that game thinking this is a legitimate Super Bowl contender. To me, this looks like a 7-8
turnovers. You're judging them based on turnovers and their inability to stop the run. Is Tua going to be a quarterback that delivers turnovers? No, he's not. Are they going to be a team that can stop the run? I don't know. I mean, clearly, right now you got David Long battling a hamstring injury. You're very thin at the defensive line to the point where your top defensive lineman, who is Calais Campbell, is limited to 89 snaps in the first 3 games. He only practices once a week. This is the reality when you sign a 38-year-old defensive lineman. As I wrote in the Miami Herald, and I do stand by this, there are many things and reasons that we can, before we even saw the results of the season, we can second guess. And you have, hey, your backup quarterback position is not good enough, especially because you have a fragile quarterback. Everybody saw that. And,
right.
And last except them. Last year that you got by because Tua played every single game. He wasn't trying to become the scrambling quarterback. He wasn't trying to become Josh Allen. But okay, now you see the negatives of not making sure that your backup quarterback position is good. Then also, to me, the most glaring mishap of the entire offseason is you lose Christian Wilkins, pillar of your defense, complete anchor. You lose your starting nose tackle, who only took a $7 million a year deal with the Indianapolis Colts. I have no idea how Raekwon Davis is playing. Colts. Yeah, but you can't stop the run to the level that you were last year. And right now, you're getting to the point where teams are saying, we don't have to throw. We can run. And that's not an ideal situation for a defense to be, especially when your number one thing that you want to do every single week is stop the run, make teams one-dimensional. If you're failing at that, you're going to fail at everything. But that's
trench play, which you wrote about today, has me most discouraged about this team and the possibilities, even beyond the Tua concussion, because we always knew in the back of our heads it was a possibility. So we mentioned last year average 5.0 per carry, best in the league. This year, 3.727. Run defense, which you wrote about today. Last year, 3.8 allowed per carry, top 7 in the league. This year, allowing 4.5 per carry. That's too much. We saw him obviously gash late in the Seattle game. We saw him gash one drive early in the game. We saw the Cook run against Buffalo, where you never felt like the Dolphins had the edge at the line of scrimmage. So this is what has me most worried about the rebuild, beyond the obvious of Tua's health. This team is not constructed to win in December and January. And everybody knew that they needed to put together a roster that could win in the cold, that could go into Baltimore, that could go
play better in the trenches
and be competitive. And they haven't done it. And that's why I've been a Debbie Downer or Danny Downer. And I don't want to be the complete Danny Downer, because I will say this. Their schedule obviously is very forgiving. And if Tyler Huntley can give them a lift and they can somehow emerge from this stretch of games with Tennessee, Indy, New England, then Arizona. Tua is eligible to come back against Arizona, but we don't know if he will. If they can emerge from that stretch of games with 2 wins or 3 wins, then at least when Tua comes back, they'll be in the playoff race. They'll be in the wild card race. I think that's possible, because it's certainly not an awful team, and and on paper they have more talent than each of the next 4 teams they're going to play. So could they emerge from this stretch at 500, maybe a little better than 500, or am I now overestimating them, which is the last thing I've done this season?
I don't feel comfortable giving a quarterback who might be able to learn 30 to 50 plays. Think he's going to come in here and save the team. I think everybody's going to have to step up and raise the level of their play. I just don't know if this team is capable of doing that. We shall see. But you're right, the schedule is favorable. Speaking of players in terms of raising the level of play, I wrote a column that's going to be in the Miami Herald on Friday. Barry, what was the reason why the Dolphins drafted Patrick Paul?
Because Teron Armstead, unfortunately, is always hurt.
Okay. And who's supposed to be the future left tackle of the Miami Dolphins?
It's supposed to be Patrick Paul. Teron Armstead, you can get out of his contract after this year, which is the likelihood. It's unfortunate. Teron still plays at a high level when he plays. He's just not on the field enough.
Okay. So at this point, Barry, now that you've got Teron in concussion protocol, he's probably not going to practice all week. Even if he practices, he's got the shoulder injury. You're at home. There is no more optimal time, no better opportunity for you to see where your rookie is. He had a good preseason. He's worked all week. He's been preparing for this. How many other teams are playing their second-round pick? Are you going to say as a Dolphins organization, second-round picks can't play because they're rookies? Is that who we become as an organization, where to the point where we can say rookies don't play here? Patrick Paul is probably as ready as any rookie on this roster. As Bill Parcells says, if the puppy don't bite, the dog probably won't bite. And we need to figure out if the puppy bites. I like the nasty temperament that I've seen from Patrick Paul in the exhibition season. I think that can help you from a run game standpoint. Will I sit here and tell you that he is the best and most prepared player to go in there and start the game and handle the left tackle position? No, I won't. That's probably Kendall Lamb with a full week's worth of work. However, Kendall Lamb's a 10-year veteran who's told you he's retiring. He's not the future of the position. And for you to move on to what you want to do in the future, you need to know what you have at left tackle. Because if you don't have left tackle and you're cutting Teron Armstead, then you're going to need to find a left tackle. And the only way
I agree with that in theory, but as you know, coaches never think in those terms. Coaches only think, what gives us the best chance to win Monday? Is it Kendall Lamb or is it Patrick Paul now? Now, I'm with you. I would love to know what they have in Patrick Paul. I'm encouraged like you are. He's a delightful guy to talk to. He's very self-aware. He said to me a couple of weeks ago, look, my run blocking was not good enough at Houston. I knew I needed to improve on that. He's worked with Butch Barry fastidiously on that to improve. I think he's a better run blocker. We shall see. Obviously, his pass protection was terrific in college. Best grades from PFF of any left tackle. Allowed only 2 sacks and 1 million snaps at Houston. He's only worked at left tackle. So that's why last week when he had to come in the game, that's why you saw Kendall Lamb move over to right tackle, because Paul is practiced only at left tackle. He's a natural left tackle. I agree with you. You need to see if you have the replacement for Armstead. But to me, if coaches feel like Lamb gives them a better chance, then we're going to see Kendall Lamb. Your gut tells you Patrick Paul, though, right?
I think it should be. I remember an instance with the great Joe Philbin. Notice I said great. I'm being sarcastic, of course.
And had his broom as he was saying it. He was sweeping the locker. But I'm sorry. I digress.
No, he actually didn't sweep. He just walked around picking things up. I remember one owners meeting where he talked about, I think it might have been after his first year, where his greatest regret was that he didn't play some of the young players that needed to step up and play in an elevated role. He wished they had the film, they had the opportunity, they had the teachable moments. Okay, here is my point to the Miami Dolphins organization. You already know Teron is more than likely not going to gain clearance for this game. You already know Teron would probably benefit from having a week's rest on that troublesome shoulder, because before he got hurt, wasn't that good. This is your time. How many times have you seen a young player have the opportunity to go out there, showcase themselves, and rise to the occasion, or show you that, hey, this young guy's got some upside? He is a second-round pick, the 55th pick in the 2024 draft. Stop babying him. Put him out there. So we'll see what happens.
I think you won me over with that. I want to see Patrick Paul too. And by the way, speaking of young players, I want to touch on this before we go today. Cornerback, as you were on to at the beginning of this week, it's a concern. So not only is Kendall Fuller in concussion protocol, not only is Storm Duck dealing with a shoulder injury that left him limited at practice today, but today we discovered that Saran Neal, who obviously is primarily a special teams player, but also is in the 2 deep at corner, he has been limited by a hamstring injury. So that's 3 corners on your 53 who aren't healthy. So if, God forbid, all 3 of them can't play on Monday, then you're looking at obviously Jalen Ramsey, Kader Kohu probably opposite him, Ethan Bonner, then Kohu moves to slot if Bonner is playing on the edge, and then you'll have to elevate either Nick Needham or Isaiah Johnson or possibly both. So those would be your corners if all of them can't play. So Fuller didn't practice at all today. Saran Neal didn't practice at all today because of the hamstring. Storm Duck practiced in a red non-contact jersey with the shoulder. He was limited. We're not sure if he's going to be able to play Monday or not. So I want to touch on that just defensively. Any other defensive things percolating besides the run defense that you want to touch on?
For David Long if he's not able to play.
Yes, a big one. And we'll see Anthony Walker. If Long can't play, the hamstring's still limiting Long. And it's so ironic, Omar, where he has the hamstring injury against the former team whose then coach, Mike Vrabel, obviously he's not there now, said he was a repeat offender with soft tissue injuries. So the irony of that, it'd be even more ironic, of course, if Vrabel was still there, but Brian Callahan now coaches the Titans. So Long would be a tremendous loss to their run defense. Anthony Walker was solid in his snaps last week. He's next man up, Duke Riley behind him. But that is a big deal because David Long against the run has been, I think, their best defender this year.
Yes, definitely. And they're going to have to challenge for themselves against the Tennessee Titans in that run game. Well, on that note, Barry, we will be back later this week to give you the preview for the Miami Dolphins Monday night game against the Tennessee Titans. On that note, Dolphins in Depth, we are out.